Hey guys, Kevin for the series premiere of Vinyl, and oh my god, guys, I am so happy to finally be reviewing this series premiere too, because if you guys know, you guys probably knew already, but Vinyl was without a doubt my most anticipated new series of the winter season. Definitely, I could not wait for this show. I mean, just the premise in general really interested me, and then knowing Martin Scorsese was doing it, as well as Mick Jagger, he was collabing with him, and Terrence Winter, who did Boardwalk Empire with him. I mean, this series really seemed like it was going to be great. I was a bit worried just because of how hyped I was for it, but I gotta say, this did not disappoint me at all. I got completely sucked in to this to the show. I love every single character. I pretty much love every single scene that was going on in this, and I really see this, guys, as the movie before the actual show, because it was 2 hours, and because that, this review is probably gonna be like 40 minutes. I'm warning you guys, because obviously I'm gonna talk about everything that happened in the first episode, because you kind of have to with this show. But let's just get into it. Like I said, I really love this show, and by far the best pilot I have seen so far this year. So we start off in New York in 1973, and things are very mysterious right away. We see Richie Finestra, our main character. He's breathing heavily in his car, drinking and looking very tense. A man tells someone to check him out because obviously he looks very tense, and basically he asks if he's lost. Richie says that he's looking for sugar, which I believe is supposed to just be like a name for cocaine. And he says, a pig is always riding the newest model. Richie says he just wants an 8-ball, then says to make it a quarter. He tells him it's $2.80, but Richie only can give him 20 for whatever reason. And he asks if he's a Wall Street man, if he says he's a record man at least until now, and the man asks what happens now. Richie tells him to get out. The man then throws a cigarette across the window of Richie's car. Richie then gets out some cocaine. He tries to open the glove compartment, but no use. He puts some cocaine on the windshield and then uses a detective's card by the name of Eric Volhill to snort the cocaine. And again, we don't really know what's going on here. I like the uncertainty. It really sucked me in. I gotta say, I'm like, okay, this is really interesting. He then makes a call, calls the detective that's, on the detective card, but says nothing. He then sees a bunch of people just walking on his car, heading to some sort of rock concert, and he hangs up the phone, goes to the concert. At first, he's not let through, and it's clear the people know who he is. They know he's Richie Finestra, but then they let him through. He goes in the nightclub, sees many things, such as a passed out rocker. He sees, like someone getting a blowjob. He sees people doing cocaine. I mean, this is what a rock concert really is. He walks along to see New York Dolls performing. Many of the audience is half naked. He sees them perform. He looks shocked and astonished at what he sees. And while the rest of the crowd is rocking out, he's just standing and looking around, not fully comprehending what he's seeing. And I'll talk about why that's so important when we get to the end of this episode, which will be like 40 minutes into this review. Like I said, guys, this is going to be a long review. I'm warning you guys. If you guys thought I've done long reviews before, this episode is 2 hours without no cuts, okay? There's no commercial breaks in this episode, so be prepared. This is going to be a long one, and I can't really cut it down anyway. So we then hear Richie say that when he started the rock business, now we then see this like very detailed monologue, which I love, because that's something that Martin Scorsese is all about. He is all about character monologues. He's all about these very long narrations that go on. But what I liked about this, that it didn't go on the whole episode, because that would have been annoying if it did. I like that it went, a little bit and then kind of went away. It really worked and showed that just Martin Scorsese, he is trying to make this as cinematic as possible. And you know what? I really like that, because originally, guys, this was supposed to be a movie, and I really like the way they did that. So we hear Richie say that when he started the business, rock and roll was risky, but now it's changed so much it's not even recognizable as the thing people used to be so afraid of. He says he always tried to give the audience what they wanted. In return, they make him look ridiculously fucking rich. And he says, we may want to hate him for it, but to know that he earned his right to be hated. We then see 5 days before, Richie is in a boardroom with members of his company in Germany, and he's talking to this company that speaks German. We don't know really what's going on at this point. He says he started at the bottom, working every club in New York, mopped floors, swapped ashtrays, hauled kegs. We see a paper about proposal for stock purchases at Century Records Incorporated. He says by the time it's the early 60s, he got to start his own record company. Then he built it into a label, and that label ate up other people's labels. And he says he had a golden ear, a silver tongue, a pair of brass balls, but the problem became his nose and everything he put up it. And add to that a couple of disastrous artist signings. And by 1972, the label was bleeding bleeding, but that's what partners are for. And he then introduced us to Zach Yankovic, who is basically his right-hand man and head of promotions. We see Zach go to talk to a radio host named Mitch. He gives him a record to play, and in exchange, he gives him some cocaine to do. And you kind of see that this is the way that they force people to, that they get people to play their records. And Richie explains to us that this is how songs really do get played. It's not just because they're good. There has to be reasons why that happens. And I thought that was definitely very interesting. And I'm pretty sure that maybe this isn't necessarily true, but I'm pretty sure there are stories where artists had to do some questionable things to get their song played on the radio. I think that's very interesting. And he says Zach is the wolf in sheep's clothing. He then introduced us to Skip Fontaine, who's the head of sales and who Richie clearly, Richie does not like his mustache. He always makes fun of it. He says all the records the stores sent back to them for a refund. Skip made them disappear. He says suddenly a disaster becomes a profit, but still it's clear all the book cooking in the world won't save the company. He says it's time to dump and run and tells us this is his story, cloud by lost brain cells, self-aggrandizement, and maybe a little bullshit, but how can it not be? He says he's going to shut up, put on a record, crank the needle, and put up the funking volume, and I thought that was a very good way to start it, because we know already a lot about three characters. Now we just need to see it all play out, and we then see Richie looking at the stock purchases paper. One of the men asks him if all is in order and asks if there's a problem with the document. He says his company's name is American Century, and they drop the American because obviously they're from German. They can't really, work if they're not from America. And the man says the Polygram is an international conglomerate, so it makes sense to drop the American part of it. And Zach says to call the money that they're paying Nazi worlds, which there are some very, sexist and racist jokes and even segregated jokes in here. But honestly, it makes sense for the time. I mean, things weren't as clean as they were then. I mean, things weren't as PC. So I'm fine with that. I don't really have a problem that they're going to say things. And I like that they're taking risks. They're not trying to censor anything because that's how it was back then. I like that they said that. So Richie makes sure they're buying it. Skip says that he's just a little sentimental. And Richie says American Century was his father's jazz band in which he played the horn, and they ask if they should sign him to the record deal. And Richie says that he died in the war in Pearl Harbor. It's a very small detail, but definitely something you can tell really meant a lot to Richie. I mean, his father clearly got him into rock and roll, and they tell him that soon they will all be very wealthy men, and they ask how the Led Zeppelin deal is coming, and basically Richie says it's coming better than the Hindenburg, which of course is what Led Zeppelin stepped on in their album, which I honestly thought that was pretty funny. And Zach says their guy in the streets in the States is closing the deal now. The man says in the meantime, they hope he's seriously considering their offer to join their corporate strategy division in New York. Richie says he's definitely mulling it. One of the men say that their attorney wants to review the balance sheets one last time and asks if next week in New York is convenient. Skip lets them know that they can do that. They leave the meeting, and we pretty much learn everything we need to know about what they're doing here, that we know they're trying to sign Led Zeppelin. We then get this scene on the plane, which I gotta say probably was my least favorite scene in the episode, but it really was a fun scene. We see Zach, he's making fun of the Germans, and saying they have ways of making them sign the papers. Obviously, they don't really take these guys seriously, but the Cold War was also going on, so that makes sense why they are so afraid of the Germans, and this was after the war, so it kind of makes sense why that happened, and everything. So Skip wonders how many times lawyers need to look at the papers. Richie says it's due diligence, and we find out that Zach is Jewish. Again, another really small thing, but I think kind of important. Richie tells him to relax, everything is going to be fine. Zach says he hopes so before they cut a check to Zeppelin. Skip agrees he couldn't even bury a check that big, and Richie says that these classical music guys don't understand the rock business, and a signed contract to Zeppelin is catnip. It's going to be easy to do. They all do coke, except for Richie. Richie does not do coke. We see he doesn't do it, and which is interesting, because we know in the first scene he was in fact doing cocaine, but here he doesn't do it. So Zach says they're going to join the Mile High Club, jokes he's going to get that he got a blowjob on a bus once and is in for the Foot High Club, and they start to flirt with these two women, basically, and they want to have sex with them, and Richie says to join him for a foursome later, and I thought that was just a fun scene, probably like my least favorite scene in the episode, but I still really enjoyed it looking back. So we then get introduced to Jamie Vine, who I love this character. She gets off the train, she packs her backpack, then gets up, then she goes into an elevator and goes to American Century. We then see the receptionist Heather, who's asked by Kip Stevens if he can have his tape delivered to the head of A&R, Julie, short for Julian. Jamie notices the tape and he says it's his band, The Nasty Bitch. She she says she will take it. She works for Julie, and he asks what's up with the music, and she says it's Slade, which Kip is not really interested in. He's not a fan of Slade. He thinks that they're like too, I don't know, maybe he thinks that they're too modern or whatever. He's just not a fan of them. And very interesting stuff. I mean, again, it's very small detail, but just very interesting. Just hearing Kip's opinion. And she asks if they have a manager. He says they don't, but they are playing a gig at the Coventry tomorrow night, and she says she will give it a listen and get back to him. She watched him leave and asks Heather who puts the music on, and she says it's Phoebe, and she says whoever's there first puts on the music. Jamie says to set her alarm early tomorrow, and there were some really funny scenes here. This was definitely one of them. I really like that scene. I mean, that scene really felt like classic Scorsese, I gotta say. So she goes to her desk, stashes it with drugs, and we find out that basically she's the one that gives out drugs to people. I mean, if anyone ever needs some like painkillers or something, or drugs in general because they're not feeling well, Jamie's in charge of doing that. And just seeing her having to do all this, it's pretty crazy. It really is. And she then plays the tape in and listens to it. And then we meet Clark Morrell, who then comes in and who's definitely one of the big comic reliefs of this show. I mean, he really is funny. And tries to get her attention. She says to get off of her, and he asks who she's listening to and if it's suicide, because if it is, they're way too niche. And she asks what he wants, and he says a blowjob, but he was hoping for a little ounce of weed. She says he can't even be creepy when he tries. He says he wasn't really trying, and she asks what he needs a whole ounce for, and he says he has a marathon recording session. She says she's sorry. She asks if he wants bennies to keep him awake, and he rejects it. He asks her what's the latest on the thing that they're not supposed to know about, and she asks if he's really going to try and bet and bond with her now, and he says she knows his job could be on the line. He begs her. She finally tells him that Cece spoke to Richie before they took off to Hamburg, and of course she's talking about the Zeppelin deal. That's what she's trying to talk about, and she said he sounded pretty stoked, and he asks if she's serious. She asks what he's worried. Julie loves him, and he says nobody is safe if they get bought out, especially him. He's got 0 signings to his name this year, and every band approached said they don't like his face. Yeah, there's something wrong with it, and she says they just scored the Zeppelin deal, and he says Richie did, but any of them, if they can't justify their existence, then they're fucked, and they're probably gonna leave. So she gives him goofballs to calm the nerves, and then we get one of the best scenes of the episode. I love this scene. Again, classic Scorsese. This was just, I love this. This really felt like something out of a Scorsese movie. I loved it. We hear Julie, he's screaming on the phone to a man named Buck, and it seems like they lost him to Donny Osmond. But just his reaction when he was just like, Buck, 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 and then got off the phone, he was like, fuck, fuck. But I mean, it was a great scene, a great introduction to his character. I loved it, and one of my favorite scenes of the episode by far. So Richie's in the car, tells the limo driver to head to Greenwich for his kids' recital in the morning, but the driver tells him that there is an emergency. They need to go to the 33rd and 7th, and he goes to a Zeppelin concert to close the deal and sees Robert Plant, and Robert's surprised to see him and didn't even know about the deal, obviously because they want to talk to their lawyers before anything else happens. And Robert knew nothing about, basically tells him that the deal is not going to work. Richie says that he's going to make it right, then goes to see Zeppelin perform, cries, realizing he's lost. I really did feel bad for him here, because this is something he really wanted to do, and it didn't really work at all. So he then calls Scott E. Levitt, but it goes to his answering machine, and Richie tells him to pick up. Scott picks up. Richie tells him he's a fucking imbecile and asks how Plant knew the rate and that he tried to cut it, and Scott says it must have been the lawyers. Richie lets them know that they think the deal is done and says to call Grant first thing and apologize and give them the 20% and close the deal. The driver asks him if he wants to go to Greenwich, and Richie agrees. We see there's a lot of chaos outside of a parking lot because of a water main break, and Richie passes out in the back seat. He wakes up, tells her driver to take him to the apartment. He sees a bunch of black people playing records and tells the driver to pull over and asks the man in charge what this music is and tells him to take it easy. And there's another man that comes out who is asking the man what's going on, everything, and he says that he has no business being here. He looks very shocked that Richie's there, and we find out what's really going on here. This man is Lester Grimes, and this was the man that told Richie to leave, and we learn that they actually have a history. Lester was a singer when Richie used to bartend, and I really love this backstory. I thought this was definitely very well done, especially if the episodes have these flashbacks in them. I'm really going to enjoy it because the flashbacks really get to show when Richie wasn't this very powerful guy and when he wasn't the nicest man. It actually shows when he was a good guy and then he tried to do the right thing, and I really like these scenes. They're very sad because you know that something happened between Lester and Richie and that's not going to work, but they're very good as well. I really just love these scenes, and basically Lester says he's clearly more than a fan and has some very good ear for music. Richie realizes that he has a manager, and basically, Lester asks Richie if he plays an instrument. He says he used to write songs, and Lester says to keep at it. And basically, they bond over their love of blues. Just a really great scene. He gets a call, and we then see him play some more, and Richie listens to his music in his office. He gets a call from a woman, his wife Devon, we are introduced to, and she asks him what happened, and he lies and says he got stuck in traffic on the cross recital on the Bronx because he didn't want to wake her up. And Devin reminds him his daughter has a recital at camp. He tells her about what happened with Zeppelin, and she says that he thought he said it went well. He says it did, and now he has to fix it. And she asks what time he'll be home. He says later tonight, and tells her if this deal goes through, he just wants things to go back to normal. And she says to do what he has to do, and says she has to get them at camp and then a ton of errands. And he asks if it's for a party. She says it's none of his business, and he says he doesn't want one, and I thought it was kind of a fun scene here. You see that she really does care about him, and he says he can't always get what he wants, and of course she is quoting Rolling Stones, which I thought was pretty funny. So Cece tells Richie that Lester Bangs returned his call, and David Geffen said something about a publishing check for Jackson Brown, and then hung up on her, and he says to give it to Clark, and then she tells him Zach needs to see he's with Scott and Mr. Grant, and he asks if she's talking about Peter Grant from Led Zeppelin, who is Led Zeppelin's band manager, and she says she's not sure, but he's English, and Peter is pissed that he talked business with his client behind his back, and Richie says he was trying to get his attention. Peter asks if he was going to tell him about Polygram, and informs none of their money is going to them, and Richie says he was going to tell him, but he knows their confidentiality agreements, and you can see that Peter has this deep hate for Germans because his father lost his leg to them, and his mother has like shrapnel in her ass because of it. I mean, it's really, really tragic, I gotta say. And Zach tells them the two of them were Dutch. I loved that scene where he just leaves and Zach's like, two of them were Dutch. I mean, that was really funny. I thought that was really great. So Richie's infuriated that Scott told Peter about their deal with Polygram, and Scott says it slipped out. Peter was intimidating Richie, then Richie starts fighting him, and Zach tells him it's too late, that Ahmet offered Zeppelin their own label and asked him if he believed that shit he had in the deal, and used them for leverage. Richie says that Polygram is going to be there on Thursday and they're fucked, and Zach says there's more Buck Rogers from radio broadcasting. We find out what happened with Donny Osmond. Apparently, Donny Osmond stiffed him on some promotion thing, and he's threatening not to play the new album. And Richie says he'll go talk to him. Zach says he's talking about boycott label-wide and says he wants to bring in Joe Corso. And Richie says he's a thug, and Zach says he doesn't know that he's good at what he does, and he shouldn't say things he doesn't know. He's the best promotion man in the business, and Skip says there are 14 radio stations threatening not to play any of their albums, and pretty soon it'll spread like leukemia. Zach says that they're going to be bankrupt in a month, and Richie says to bring it to Corso and to buy them, so charge since Polygram is watching them paper ads on Cashbox and even a single on Billboard's Top 20 if he can, and tells Skip to inflate the fuck out of the sales numbers, and meanwhile he'll go lean on A&R. So he tells Scott to go to the emergency room to see if they can head out to get his head, and then he tells Scott to go to the emergency room so they can get his head out of his ass, because Scott he's really stupid. He really is. And I think he's funny, but he's stupid as well. So Richie goes to A&R, asks what the music playing is. Jamie says that they're a Swedish girl group named ABBA, I love this scene. Marvin, who has a hangover, thinks it sounds like Alvin and the Chipmunks, while Jamie actually thinks it's catchy and danceable. And Richie turns off the record, as if they're all hearing this the same way. He says there are three bars he can tell that they'll be filling football stadiums, and asks where they are with the Good Rats, and Clark says that they went with Warner's, and Richie says that he needs to sign the next Good Rats like he's fucking paying him to, and he says he will go. Richie tells him to sit down and eat. He says their roster's all over the place between the disco and Donny Osmond and just everything. It's not rock. It's not what he wants. And Casper says that there's nothing good out there in the city, and Richie tells him to get out of the city, and he tells them that Ahmet Erdogan walked through a fucking swamp to sign, and Casper says they all know the story. Richie asks if he's a wise ass now, and he says he just hears him, and Richie says he hears nothing. He says out there in the world they call their label American Cemetery, where artists go to die, and Casper says that they should get new offices. Richie says he likes it there, and says that they could find talent in bars, dance clubs, high school talent shows, wherever people sing. And Marvin says the public restrooms is where people go to sing. He always hears them in there. And Julie says it took him 9 months to sign Jose Feliciano, which if you guys know that, that's the guy that sings the song Feliz Navidad, which I thought was interesting. So Richie says he wants what's next. Jamie tells him about the nasty bits and that they're raw, but she thinks that they're pretty good. And Clark tries to shut her down, but Richie's interested. He asks where she found them. She says she saw the singer on a subway and she liked his look. And he says that's what he's talking about. And basically, he's saying that he's surprised that someone who gives them sandwiches is the one that gives the best ideas. Obviously, he thinks that's kind of pathetic. He tells Clark to go sign David Gavin because he was supposed to sign the Good Rats. Julie says he doesn't have a fucking thing to add to that, and I thought that was a great scene. I really love that. So clearly he's interested. And back in the past, Lester and Richie meet with record company owner Maury Gold, who says he loves the blues but isn't sure if anyone will buy it. He just doesn't really know if it's popular right now. And Richie says he could sing the hell out of it, and Lester says that's not who he is. Richie says he cut him a few records under a different name. He charts a few hits, then he starts recording the real stuff, and he asks if he lets him sing the blues. Maury says he doesn't give a fuck what he sings, he just wants hits. Lester says he doesn't know what to say, and Maury asks if he wants to sing in a bar for the rest of his life, and he says he's offering him a record contract, and says he's offering Little Jimmy Little, which is going to be his stage name, and Maury says that 500 is what they will pay him. He talks to Richie, asks how he's doing, he asks if he's retired, he says to get him in line, he says he wants to sing blues, and he says his manager, and he needs to manage him. He says he has a good ear and he likes it, and basically he needs to manage him. And I thought that was interesting, and he likes it. He's sharp and to play his cards right and don't be a schmuck. So back in the present, Jamie watches the Nasty Bits play. The crowd is not having it. They're booing. I mean, it really is crazy. And they try to keep things under control, but the crowd just starts throwing things. A whole riot breaks out. It really is crazy, and the crowd doesn't stop. And it's just really interesting. If there really was a band like that in the 70s, I mean, that was insane. I can't believe that actually happened, but I gotta think that probably did happen. I mean, you gotta think that there probably was a band out there that was like that, because that really is crazy. So Richie goes to a strip club, goes to meet with Buck, who's pissed because he flew his entire family down to meet with Osmond. Now, he says a lot of stuff here, but I basically just got the major points here. He flew his entire family down to meet with Osmond, who said he was in the hospital, and then the next day was at a county fair. Buck says no matter what, the bigger they are, there's always a money man, and that they can always be bigger. And we found in the scene that Richie's trying to quit his cocaine addiction, we find out, and basically, I thought it was a good scene. You can tell that Buck is not interested in Donny Osmond, but Richie wants to sign because he's really all they have left. They don't really have anyone else, and if he doesn't sign him, their country is going to go bankrupt, and their company's going to go bankrupt, and he obviously doesn't want that. So Jamie has sex with Kip, and she tells him that she's never done this before, mixed business with personal, lets him know that she's interested in the band. She says they need to keep this professional. She says he needs to be a lot better if he wants to get signed. She's seen high school bands play better than him, and his one saving grace is that people hate him. They hate his band. They want nothing to do with him. She says she hasn't seen a band get that sort of reaction ever, and he says they were trying to kill them, and she says because that they made them feel something, and he needs to work on a persona, and she talks about how Iggy Pop is doing that, but he doesn't agree and feels the guy is a big phony. She asks what he does give a shit about, and he really says it comes down to nothing. First, he says things like fucking and fighting, but then he says nothing, and she says that's his persona, not giving a fuck about anything, and she gets dressed, and I think that's a good persona to have. I mean, with rock, you gotta be, really tough. You gotta be really angsty and things like that, and that really is a great persona to have when it comes to rock. So, and, he shouldn't let the crowd get to him. He should just fight them, and because, he doesn't care. So she gets dressed. He asks if she's sure she doesn't want to stay. She says she has to go. She leaves, and he injects, I believe, heroin into his arm, which was popular back then. So Devon and Richie's daughter are asleep. Richie comes home, asks why his daughter isn't in bed. She says she had a stomach thing. She asks how the Oasis was, and he says these guys are animals between Corso and Rogers. And she says his eyes are bloodshot, and he says he's not high. She says it was just an observation, and he can relax. He says their future and everything is riding in the sail, but the company is dead, and there's nothing there. Even if he can pull this thing off, the Germans will just scrap it, and when they find it's just an empty shell, it'll all be gone like it never existed for 20 years, just gone, nothing. And she says to take the polygram job, which, yeah, that probably would be the best thing to do, but he's asked if she really thinks that's him. She says she doesn't know. She says she's trying, to help him. She doesn't know what he wants, and she says he needs a change, and she says she does too. And he says he knows. He puts his daughter to bed, and then back in the past, Richie sets up Lester's recording of Little Jimmy Little's Cha Cha Twist, which is completely different from what Lester wanted. It's a pop song, and Richie sees Maury's daughter tell her to go up there and support Lester, and she loves it. It's a very good scene. I really like that. I like seeing this more caring side of Richie. Like, he really does want Lester to become this big thing, and Richie remembers Lester's music as he sits in the boardroom with lawyers who tells him 6 million profits that American Century claimed, yet 90% of the records they released flopped. And I like the way that Richie told him this, because it only seemed that way that artists aren't tuxedo-clad maestros. They are pop artists, and they're not the most sophisticated individuals. And on one side, they've got them, the record execs, and on the other side are the artist lawyers who want to be record execs, and so they want to piss them off by being too good at the job. Next, they have the contract itself. He says to assume an artist gets paid $1 for every record sold, less recoupable expenses. So sell 1 million records, then that's $1 million. But there's the word recoupable. That means no matter how many records they sell, the actual cost producing that record always comes out of the artist's end. Physically manufacturing the record, touring costs, studio space, marketing, packaging. If a drummer drinks a Pepsi in the middle of recording that album, he's paying more, and they really have no flops, but the hits where they cash in are big. So Polygram says their biggest hitmaker would have been Led Zeppelin. I like the way they say it. He's like, your biggest hitmaker would have been the Led Zeppelins. No? I thought that was very funny. And Richie says maybe, but he can't do business with them because of Peter's hatred for Germans. They try to make themselves look good in front of them. And then we see Richie's birthday party. He's recorded by a friend, Dom, tells him if he doesn't get the camera out of his face, we will throw him in the pool. And Devon meets with her best friend, Ingrid, and asks what she's doing here. She says she's here with a friend, John Addison, and he owns Devon and Andy Warhol was there and asked for her just the other night. Lou was with them, and he did his eyeliner in black and blue two-tone like she used to. She says Andy asked if she was happy, and she's stunned by the place, and it's clear that she had something going on with Andy Warhol. We don't really know what's going on here, but something was going on there, and Ingrid wants her to come back, but Devon says that she's happy with, Richie and the kids and everything, and her heart is full, and Ingrid says to come back. So definitely it's going to be interesting to see what happens here, especially after a scene at the end of this episode, which we'll get into. Devon makes a toast to Richie, tells him a story about how they were planning on going to Woodstock and were made because they didn't make it out of bed. Richie says he doesn't regret 1 second of it. Zach, Skip, and Scott give him his present. It's a guitar that he's always wanted. It is, in fact, the twang machine that Bo Diddley used to play and use in concert. They all toast to Richie, and obviously he's shocked because this is a very rare guitar, and Zach asks if they heard anything from the Rhine Monkeys, and Richie says it's radio silence, and he asks what they're going to do. Richie says they're just going to wait. He says if by some miracle this sale happens, their artists and A&R Polygram's going to cut them loose, and Zach asks if he's a communist now and tells him it's business, thanks him for the guitar, and we get this really great scene where he remembers when he and his friends went to see Blackboard Jungle and the opening song. And something I like about the show is that when they're talking about these things, they'll cut so we know what they're talking about. And it really, I think, makes it not just more cinematic, but more effective. Like, it puts us in that moment and shows us that adrenaline rush that Richie really has. And he talks about the opening song, 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock that song. He said Jim and his friend just went fucking crazy. And Zach asks what that is. Richie says it's rock and roll. Richie gets a call in his Corso. He says they're at Buck's house on Long Island. He wants to talk to me. He's got to get over there now. He says he has a house full of people and it's his birthday. And I like that he doesn't want to leave, but Corso's insisting that he has to do it, that this was important, he needs to get over there. And Richie looks at Devon, really isn't sure what to do, because obviously this is his birthday party that she planned for him, and he doesn't just want to leave, but at the same time, he knows what this is about. He knows that Buck is there, and he might, be able to sign him or whatever. He doesn't really know what's going to happen, so he's really conflicted. So back in the past, Richie's on the phone about possible acts for Lester. He comes in, says he hasn't seen a check since November. Richie says that sales have been slow, and Lester says to cut him another record, and he says he doesn't want to be Little Jimmy. He wants to cut a record as Lester Grimes. He doesn't want to play these pop songs. He wants to be blues, but it's just not going to sell. And Richie basically says that it's not his decision, it's Maury's fault. He's got gambling problems. He says he has bills himself. Tells him he just wants to sing. Richie says he's going to talk into Maury's creditors and work something out. He's going to go out on his own and start his own label, and promises him no more bullshit dance records. And he knows it's what he wants, and he can't really guarantee that, but he really wants to hope that he can get him what he really wants, and that's to not be this big, pop star. It's not what Lester wants. He wants to be a blues artist, and that just was not popular back then, though. That's the thing. It was kind of dying at that point, unfortunately. So I really do like the way this is going. I gotta say, probably one of my favorite parts of this episode was this subplot. So Buck listens to Iron Man. Richie arrives at his house. Buck asks what took him so long. He says he lives in Connecticut. And Buck says for cocksuckers and living in the middle of the woods. I gotta say, guys, this scene, if you guys remember the scene in Boogie Nights where they go to that drug dealer's house, I don't remember exactly who he was, but you guys remember that scene with the guy in the bathrobe listening to Sister Christian? Very much reminded me of this scene. I mean, the tension, just the scare, the pure insanity of Buck Rogers really remind me of the scene in this episode. I mean, this really was crazy here. Basically, Corso tells him to, he talks about how, Buck says it's for cocksuckers that live in the middle of the woods with dirty little secrets and Lyme disease. He says record guys crack him up with college educations and big words and fancy clothes. And he says he's nothing without him. Radio invented rock and roll, not him or Donny Osmond. It was all him, and starts to act like Elvis. Takes out a gun. Corso tells him to put it down. Richie says that Corso said he wanted to talk. Corso asks if he remembers he told him to come over to talk to him. Buck says he wants to eat. Richie wants to leave, but Corso tells him he needs to stay because obviously he has a family to go to. He doesn't really want to be there. Richie says that he thought that they were done, and he says it ain't over till the big man says it's over. Richie says he has work and family commitments. He tells him to come over and asks him if he's ever seen Frankenstein before, and he says it scared the shit out of him when he was a kid, but in life you gotta go face your fears, and he keeps saying it over and over again. Basically, that's the advice he's giving him, that he has to face his fears, and Buck tells him the song playing is also called Frankenstein, which is called Synergy, and Buck asks if he loves his wife, and he says that's how it starts, and he says if he wants his respect and his business to tell him where his wife is, and it's a very emotional scene, because we found out before that his wife just had sex with his brother, and it really is a sad scene, I gotta say, because you can see that Buck kind of is jealous of Richie's life, because he has it all. He has this really successful company, he has a caring wife, he has a very nice life, he has friends that care about him, and Buck really doesn't seem to have that, and I really did feel bad for him here. As crazy as the guy is, his life really is very sad. You see that definitely. And basically he says his eyes sparkle like the Nile. He goes to kiss him, and he goes to kiss him, starts to choke Richie, but Corso hits him with a trophy. Richie asks what he did. He says he hit first, and Richie says he wasn't trying to kill him, but now he's dead. Corso tells Richie to come with him, and he says they have to wrap him up and get rid of him. Richie doesn't know how they're going to do that, but Buck is not dead. He tries to choke Richie again. They knock him out again, and Corso bashes his head with a vase to make sure he's dead. It's a very crazy scene. Richie gasps because he's never really done anything like this before, and says they have to call the cops. Corso says they don't do that on something like this. Richie says they're going to search the house, and it was self-defense, and Corso says they smashed his brains in. Richie says he did it. Corso says they're going to clean up the mess and take him and get rid of him. Jamie gets ready for... So now we pretty much know what that whole first scene was about. This probably is something that's going to scare Richie, and it really is crazy. So Jamie gets ready for another party, and we see what we think is her mother, as if she was just at one, and Jamie says it's a loft party, but then we find out it's not her mother. She's staying with this woman, Bellamy, who we don't know who this is, but she's begging her to stay with her for one more month. She says she found a hot band, and she asks what that means. She says it means she can convince the company to sign them, and then they'll make her an A&P rep, and she can get a place of her own, and it's clear that she thinks that she can get this more better job, but you don't really know if she's gonna get it. Jamie just hopes, but she can't really guarantee that she's gonna get it. She just wants to hope that she's gonna get it, which is very interesting. So Corso's in the car with Richie. He tells Richie that they will dump him, and the cops will think it's just another drug deal that went bad. Richie asks what happens after that. Corso says he gets on with his fucking life, and you can clearly tell that Richie can't do that. Corso has done this a lot of times. He's killed people before. Richie's never done this. I mean, this is something that he just feels terrible over, and it really, the change in Richie in these scenes are really incredible. Richie asks the cops to come around. He says they know nothing, and the last thing the cops is an investigation on a scum like this. They find a lake. Corso gets Buck out of the truck and dumps him, and Jamie tells him that the nasty bits are raw, like she said, but are edgier than Neon Boys and angrier than the dolls. She went and saw them and kill it live. Nuts. Electric energy was amazing. He agrees that they're good, and you can tell that he's just not feeling it. He's really out of it. Cece tells him that Zach wants to see him right away, then gives him the Detective Vohill's card we saw in the first scene. Now we know how he got it. We know there's a detective already after him, and Zach, Skip, and Scott tell him the board okayed the buyout, and they did it. He says he doesn't feel so good, which obviously is a great thing, but he doesn't feel good, and Richie walks out, tells him he'll call them later, and back in the past, Maury's being offered a deal by someone named Galasso. Richie, who is, of course, his creditor, and, Richie makes a suggestion to buy him out, that he wants the stocks and everything, and even asks him about, signing, releasing Little Jimmy Little from his contract. But Galasso's not interested because his daughter loves Little Jimmy Little's music. So unfortunately, while he really does want to make this promise to Lester, it's not going to happen. You can definitely tell what happened between Lester and Richie. It's clear that Lester had this idea, but Richie could just never make it up to him. So it kind of makes sense why these two, are kind of against each other right now. And I feel like there's more to it, definitely, but it definitely is very interesting. So basically, we then see after this that we see that Richie listens to nasty bits, and then he sees on the TV an investigation going on about two white males being badly beaten and have yet to be identified, and he runs out of his house. Obviously, he's terrified. He's just running around because, like Corso said, there wouldn't be anything about it, but now he's seeing on the TV there's an investigation going on. He knows that he's a part of it, and obviously he's terrified because, like I said, he's never done anything like this before. And then we get, like, one of the craziest scenes. It just came out of nowhere. We see back in the past some record executives, along with Galasso, badly beat up Lester with a bat and tells him he owns his contract, and says he either sings for him and he doesn't sing at all. They choke him, then drive away, and then they just leave. So this very much, I think, was how they treated people like Lester, his race back then. It really is crazy what happened in that scene. I couldn't get over that scene, but I'm pretty sure things like that actually did happen back then. I mean, this was the 50s. I believe it takes place in the 50s or the 60s, something like that. Of course, the present takes place in 1973, but this takes place, I believe, in the 50s. So, very interesting stuff. Richie searches his pantry for his beer, which he has kept hidden, and then plays the twang machine, starts rocking out. His son Ronnie comes out, asks him what he's doing. He says he's just dancing. Devon tells him to go back to bed. She looks visibly shaken and scared. It's clear that she's seen the side of Richie before, but he hasn't been like this in a while. And he tells her he fucked up really bad. He wants to tell her, and she says she can. He says he can't, but she thinks it's because their life isn't enough for him. And he says it's not that. Tells him to take the beer, that he needs the beer, and to have some. He drinks the beer. She takes a drink as well, that spits in his face, disgusted, and obviously, she really has no idea what he's really upset about, and he's not going to tell her. He's obviously really upset. So he then begins to break the guitar in the amplifier. We then go back to the first scene where Richie's watching the New York Dolls performance. The Merker Art Center, though, quickly starts to come apart, which, guys, this did happen in real life, but it wasn't during a performance, but I thought it was just more effective, which the rockers, and especially Richie, don't care about. The New York Dolls start to flee from the stage, and the entire building is destroyed, which Richie screams with excitement about, and then we see Richie comes out of the rubble, leaves the destroyed building, and he's not scared. He has this huge grin on his face because now this is his epiphany. This is him remembering why he loves rock and roll. This is remembering why he's in this business and realizing that he's not done for. They can go on, they can continue, and this is why he loves rock and roll so much, and that is how the show is actually going to start, and that's how the episode ends. But overall, guys, what an amazing premiere. There was so much to love about this first episode. I mean, I can't even go over everything I love about the show because there's just so much to talk about. Let me just start off with the cast. Let me get my phone for 1 second, guys, so I can get through everyone in the cast because there's a lot of people, like I said, to talk about. I'm trying to look for, I don't know where my phone is right now, but the cast here is great. Bobby Cannavale definitely is the standout. I think he really kills it as this character, Richie Finestra. It's clear there's a lot more going on with Richie than we thought there was. I mean, definitely, he's a very layered guy. He's done some things in the past, definitely. And especially when you see him in the 50s, he's so different to how he is now. And it's clear that Devon, this is not the first time she's seen Richie hit rock bottom before. There's been times when he's done this, and she's clearly scared of it. And definitely that's going to be very interesting to see what's going on with Richie. Because like I said, there's a lot going on with this character that we don't really know about right now. And I'm very interested in seeing what's going on there. Olivia Wilde is great as Devon. I think she does a really great job. You can tell she really cares about him. But then when he gets like this, she just doesn't know how to handle him because to her, their life isn't enough for him. That's what she thinks is going on. It's clear that that's not what's going on. There's a lot more going on than that, but that definitely is going to be very interesting. I like the people that he works with as well. Zach, Skip, Scott. They're all really great. I especially love, though, I gotta say, the guy that plays Clark. He is hilarious. I think he does a really great job in this show, and especially because he's kind of a dick, and he wants all these credits. It's very funny, and I definitely really love that. And Richie, I gotta say, I don't really think he's an anti-hero. I've heard people say he is, but this is just a man that used to be very successful. He used to be a decent guy, and now he's hit rock bottom. But now he's gonna try to turn things around. I'm definitely interested in seeing if he is gonna turn things around. I love also Juno Temple as Jamie. I think she's a really great character. I can't wait to see what goes on with her character. I mean, it's clear that she really wants to make a difference. She wants to be a bigger part of this company, and she wants Richie to make her, the head of A&P, and we'll have to see if that actually happens, if she actually gets what she wants. But why isn't she with her mother? Who is, Bellamy? What is her connection to her? Definitely, we're gonna have to find out what's going on there. Kip as well. I hope that Kip does take Jamie's advice and goes by this attitude of not giving a fuck. I think it's a very good attitude to have. I definitely really like where that's headed as well. And then Maury, the guy that plays Lester, I also really love. I like that he just wants to be this singer. He wants to be a blues singer, but he can't be because that's not what Maury, who I think is a really, really great secondary antagonist. I think he does a very good job on the show, wants, and that definitely is going to be interesting. But overall, guys, I think the cast here is really great. But I think the thing that really makes this show so great, one, the script is so great. It's classic Scorsese. I'm so happy that Scorsese directed this first episode. I think he did write other episodes, but he didn't direct any of the other episodes, unfortunately. But you really did get that dialogue in here. You got the feel. I mean, this feels like the 70s, especially because of the cinematography. The cinematography in the show is nothing short of incredible. I mean, just the shots in this show, the way the concert was done. I mean, everything feels like the 70s. The tone is perfect. You feel like you're in that time period, and I love that. I love the music as well. The music feels like 70s. Then we're in the 50s. It feels like the 50s. Guys, I was blown away by this show. I absolutely loved it. It was everything I hoped it would be. I cannot wait for the coming weeks. I, really looked incredible. And also, for a 2-hour premiere, this flew by for me. I was into it the whole time. This did not feel like 2 hours at all, and I absolutely love that. Let me know what you guys saw this first episode. I absolutely love this first episode. I can understand if you guys thought it was too long. I can totally understand, but for me, it really flew by. It was everything I wanted it to be, and I know this video was very long. Like I said, it was 40 minutes. I thought it was going to be, and I will see you guys in my next video. Like I said, I will definitely be continuing to watch this show. It's by far my favorite new show out of any of the shows I've watched so far this year. And I will see you guys in the next video, which will be for my review of Shameless, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.